that this week that his plan has 4 phases. It's not clear yet what those 4 stages are, but Little says safety is still #1 priority. And staying safe means following the stay-at-home order until it's lifted. Again, that runs through next week, through the end of the month, April 30th. Governor Little says if we don't do that, things could change quickly, including a second wave that has the potential to overrun hospital personnel.
And right now, let's go over the numbers. In Idaho, we have nearly 1,700 confirmed cases. You may notice the state is also reporting probable cases, so their number may be a little bit higher than ours on their website. 54 people have died, and the good news is 767 Idahoans have been reported as recovered. We will continue to bring you
and Intermountain Hospital
numbers.
bring you.
Now, in the whole United States, there are more than 831,000 cases and more than 46,000 people have died so far.
Well, this is also new. Crush the Curve Idaho says the numbers from their first round of antibody and COVID-19 testing came back lower than predicted. And they're testing for antibodies, which could signal a level of immunity against COVID-19. Only about 1.75% were positive. In their testing for COVID-19, only about 3% of tests were positive. They believe this shows that social distancing is working to lower the spread and that Idaho is a long way from developing what's called herd immunity. As far as national news, Congress is expected to vote on a nearly $500 billion relief bill today. It includes more than $300 billion for the small business loan program, which ran out of money last week. The first phase of it did. The Senate passed the bill earlier this week, and President Trump says he will sign it when it gets to his desk.
And Sarah Brady, Doug, getting a lot of national attention right now. She's the 40-year-old Meridian mom who refused to leave a closed playground when officers told her to. In the video, she is seen asking the officer to arrest her, and she told others to record it and then call the Freedom Foundation. It's important to know Brady was not arrested for violating the stay-at-home order. It was actually for trespassing and refusing to leave a closed area of the park. And protesters in support of Brady gathered outside to protest at the home of a Meridian police officer who made that arrest on Tuesday night. That included Ammon Bundy. They protested what happened and served the officer a complaint. Police were there to protect the officer's home and keep the peace. They did a very good job of that. They kept protesters off the property, and they were able to serve that officer their so-called complaint about what happened.
Meridian Mayor Robert Simison says Meridian will continue to operate under the governor's stay-at-home order and is focusing on working to reopen the city and businesses when that time comes. And he agrees that people reserve the right to protest, but says that sometimes there will be consequences for someone's actions. In regards to future protests, Mayor Simison says that if people do protest, they need to do it safely. Some cities are having issues of people breaking the barriers of park equipment. Boise Parks and Rec says some caution tape has been removed at several city parks, so they are now putting up chain link fences in place of the torn away plastic tape, the yellow caution or police tape that has been around most of the playground equipment, Maggie.
So there you have it, and we are waiting to see what the governor is going to decide here. He says he's going to have that 4-phase plan, Doug, but we don't know what that means exactly. As you know, the president has been urging states to open up safely as they can do that. Several states are already making plans to do that. Idaho, one of those states that's coming up with a plan, but we're not exactly sure what's going to happen, Doug, after that April 30th date.
That's right, Maggie. You know, some areas of the state were even under tighter restrictions, like Blaine County, which was really hard hit early on in the pandemic, and the county and the cities there put in an isolation order that was even stricter than what the state's order is, and that was just eased finally in Haley this past Monday. And I was talking to Senator Michelle Stennett earlier this week on the phone, and she told me that that lifting of that order then allowed contractors and landscapers to get back to work, and she said it seemed like they couldn't do that fast enough. They were really ready to get back to work. I'll be talking to her later today for our Viewpoint that's going to air coming up this weekend. Get her reaction to what Governor Little's plan is here for reopening the economy. As you said, it could be in 4 phases with safety as the top priority.
And we also want to mention that yesterday Governor Little did speak at an Eastern Idaho luncheon where he did discuss this 4-phase plan. That's how we found out about it, because he did let that let that out to the public that he did come up with this plan and he was going to propose it today. He also talked about how important it was to stay home until April 30th. He said we have to do this right, step by step, phase by phase, to make sure we do it safely. He's very concerned that that's not going to happen. He really does want people to pay attention. And Doug, I hear he is now up to the podium, so let's go ahead and listen in.
Virus in the past month. In the days following our first confirmed case on March 13th, we saw huge day-over-day increases in the number of people tested and confirmed sick. As a result, to date, dozens of Idahoans sadly have passed away. But with the statewide stay-home order on March 25th, after community spread began in multiple places in Idaho, we eventually saw those numbers start to level off as everyone did their part to limit their exposure to others. While we haven't reached a prolonged downward decline in new and severe cases, our efforts are working to flatten the curve. So thank you, Idaho, for making difficult changes to protect your loved ones and your neighbors. I know this is hard on everyone. I've spoken with many workers, business owners who have shared their stories of hardship, concern, and outright anger. I've heard from many people who are upset that our current circumstances prevent them from practicing their faith the way they want. Parents are frustrated. Children long for their teachers and classmates. Wedding plans, travel plans, incomes, and personal spending all have changed. People are genuinely afraid of their loved ones falling ill to a virus that is unfamiliar, a disease we didn't see coming. But our efforts to slow the spread have worked so well, in fact, that we have entered a new chapter, a very welcome chapter, in the story of our fight with the spread of this deadly disease. A staged reopening of Idaho's economy is underway in Idaho. Every step of the way, we have followed guidance from President Trump and the CDC, and our latest actions align with the current direction from the White House. While we know that we cannot reopen everything all at once and undo all the progress to prevent coronavirus deaths, we do have a plan to safely and responsibly reopen our economy in stages, just as the president recommends. I am happy to announce today that I've assembled a group of business leaders in Idaho to help us chart our path back to prosperity. Before COVID-19, Idaho was near the top of all the states in income growth. I am confident that the qualities about our state that attract investment and made us one of the fastest growing states in the country will help us rebound from this global pandemic. My new Economic Rebound Advisory Committee will provide recommendations on how best to rebound. The recommendations will address rebuilding of employee and consumer confidence, business stability and growth, and business promotion and attraction. Darrell Anderson, the CEO of Idaho Power, will help lead our Economic Rebound Advisory Committee. Thank you, Darrell, for your willingness to step up and serve Idaho in this capacity. Today, we are announcing our plan and a new resources available for Idahoans to track and plan for our progress in reopening the economy. Rebound.idaho.gov is our new website where Idahoans can track the progress of our economic rebound. There's information on this website with the criteria we must meet before moving to the next stage of reopening and rough timelines. The plan will occur over 4 stages and sets forth specific criteria for Idaho to move into each of the 4 stages. Opening Idaho at the right pace is critical, and the plan we are laying out will give consumers, employers and employees a concrete path back to prosperity. One final note. We cannot and will not progress through the stages of reopening if people do not continue personal measures to limit their exposure to coronavirus. That means continue to stay home as much as you can. Keep a safe social distance of 6 feet between you and others who are not members of your household. Wear protective face covering in public places and wash your hands. As recommended, we are making decisions 2 weeks at a time to make sure our actions are appropriate and won't result in a spike in severe cases and set us back. And we continue to be laser focused on where we need to improve. I want to thank the people of Idaho once again for the care and concern they have shown for their friends and neighbors. I am eager for Idaho to rebound from this pandemic, and I appreciate your patience and help in getting us there. With that, I'll take your questions.
Governor, what will happen when your current order expires? What's the first stage? What happens right away?
Well, the first stage will be, which will be on this website, will be almost all of the retail will be open. Restaurants, bars will be in later stages, but houses of faith and retail will open up at the initial outset.
Governor John Soul from the Statesman. I wrote about Middleton Fitness Center opening up on Monday. There's a bar in Nampa that says they're going to reopen on Saturday. What good is your order if it's not being enforced?
Well, John, when you look at the magnitude of what the good people of Idaho have done since we started this, one or two outliers I don't condone it in any way, shape, or form. It's not fair to the competitors. It's not fair to the rest of the citizens of Idaho that are making these sacrifices, because we don't know what we don't know about the COVID virus, but we do know as we stage opening, we will be able to protect that. And people that don't comply with this stage or other stages are basically jeopardizing the health, and think what it does to their competitors. I trust the people of the state of Idaho, 99% of them, to do the right thing. And so it's a way outlier.
But shouldn't the state take action for those places that are willfully avoiding your order?
Well, my Department of Health and Welfare doesn't have a big law enforcement division. In some municipalities, they have done some of it. But given the fact that out of 1.8 million people in Idaho, we've got a few of them that are doing that, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's a good business plan. I don't think it's good for their business. I think it's disrespectful of everybody else that's complying with it. And I trust consumer opinion and peer pressure to be perhaps the best cure for this.
Governor, you mentioned that you see 99% of the state abiding by the order, but of that 1% that's not, includes the Lieutenant Governor, Janice McGeehan, who's planning to speak at an event this weekend, and some people who even showed up to your home yesterday or 2 days ago. Do you have any response to the seemingly growing uproar of individuals who are concerned about the shutdown?
As I stated in my comments, I fully understand people that are upset. And but to my knowledge, like I said, 99% are complying. in my where I come from, there's been ample opportunity for me, and I perhaps participated in an earlier time at objections of what the government's doing. What we're doing here, what myself and our team have done, is we want to get the highest level of confidence in the people of Idaho about what we're doing. People have the right to object. Now, if they're going to object, they ought to maintain all those recommendations that I just alluded to a little bit ago. And we are giving out today evidence of the pathway they need back. I understand people saying we are frustrated about when we're going to be able to return to normal, when things are going to happen. This plan today is that pathway, and I think it will alleviate a lot of that concern.
Governor Scott Logan with Channel 2, if the 4 stages you referenced unfold as you hope, what time frame, what date do you think the state will be reopened?
Most of the state will be open by the end of June.
How much does testing play a part in the unfolding of these stages? Are you confident you're getting enough testing done? Do you want to see more testing? If so, how much?
We're going to be announcing later this week some of the, we're doing things on testing every day about what we're doing on testing, but testing, tracing, and particularly all those good behavioral things by individuals and business are part of what we need to get there, and we will. And there's enormous expansion of testing. There's new testing methods that are being made available, and we're looking at all options, just like every other state is also.
Sir, your reaction to the crush the curve testing yesterday?
Well, antibody testing is one of those many aspects. It doesn't tell you if you're sick, but antibody testing and serum testing is part of it, and that is a field of science where there's a lot of growth. Our issue with testing all along has been capacity to test, whether it be reagents, whether it be swabs, whether it be lab capacity, and so as that grows, different venues and different opportunities are going to evolve, and any and all testing, any and all efforts to promote testing, I'm all in.
Governor Melissa Davlin with Idaho Public Television. Over the past few days, we still have between 10 to 17% of tests coming back positive. And as you're saying that Idaho is still in the process of ramping up testing, how can you be confident that we really are flattening the curve, especially if those tests aren't yet widely available in rural areas?
Well, I mean, the criteria that will be available. I know you can't see it, but the criteria that's available is going to talk about what we're seeing. But remember, the tests that when we first started, and to a certain extent, even today, are skewed towards the more susceptible population, healthcare workers that we don't want to be exposed, but by their very nature exposed. So it hasn't been a random testing, and we hope to get to a point in time to where we'll have more data. But we are confident that that the percent of people that have been exposed, and you run that through a formula, and you look at the ICU and people with respiratory problems in hospitals, and that's why we think we're where we are. That's also why we're going to be. It's going to be a very metered ramp up, predicated on continued good behavior of the people of the state of Idaho, to where we know that we're not going to have a big second wave.
You've mentioned before that one of the benefits of Idaho being one of the last states to get positive tests and to hit our peak is that we've been able to learn from other states and other countries. One of the reasons South Korea was so effective in crushing their curve was they did widespread testing, even of people who weren't who were not showing any symptoms. Is that the goal for Idaho?
As we have capacity, the percent of the population we want to test is going to get bigger, but we still have to protect those people at most risk, our public safety and our healthcare people. And as the testing goes, South Korea is a little different because they had a particular group that they could radiate out from to start. As we've just seen in the last few days, everybody thought case number one was in Seattle, and evidence now, as we look back, was we think it started in California, but we have learned a lot. But you know, Idaho is a lot different than those other states. We don't have mass transit. We don't have a high percent of our population that lives in crowded areas. So this plan is aligned with CDC guidance, is that it's custom to us. We have our own model that's like Director Jepson always tells me, we know the model's wrong, but we have our own model that we look at, and the criteria that we have in our plan going forward is based on that model and based on Idaho, based on what we've learned from every place we can.
Governor, sir, as we move into the better weather, do you have any idea when campgrounds, for example, might be open?
Well, it's our intent, of course, public spaces are open for the most part. Concentrated campgrounds, there'll be guidance in those. One of the issues we have in Idaho is the state of Washington, all of their areas are closed. So if you go to North Idaho, everywhere in North Idaho has been besieged by our friendly neighbors from Washington coming across the border to utilize, and we want to maintain that dispersal. We want to allow people to get out and enjoy the great outdoors, but some of the things we're going to have to address, particularly in campgrounds, is going to be bathrooms, and that's we're going to be continuing to give guidance on those areas and try and get those opened up, because to me personally, and science is also important, it's very important for people to get out, maintain that social distancing, but not only for their physical health, but also for their mental health.
Sir, do you expect to lift, when do you expect to lift your stay-at-home order?
Well, it will be staged over 4 stages. And the first stage will be almost all the retail and houses of faith. The second stages will be restaurants. The third stage will be bars, and I think that's the but it's on that incredibly handsome new website.
Governor James Dawson from Boise State Public Radio. Building off of Mike Sharp's question earlier, are you confident that Lieutenant Governor McGeehan would carry out this phased-in reopening if, for whatever reason, you become incapacitated over the next few weeks or months?
Well, I'm taking really good care. I believe she. The Lieutenant Governor, as I alluded to in my comments, represents a lot of those people that have been incredibly frustrated. And this is a concrete plan that we're putting out today. And I look forward to her support and her comments after she sees this.
Governor, Kevin Richard, I wanted to go back to the testing issue, because as I've been watching the numbers daily on the state's website, if anything, the state is getting fewer test results per day than you were getting a week or two ago. It's been about 200 test results per day. Isn't that counterintuitive isn't it counterintuitive to be talking about reopening businesses and potentially reopening schools when you're getting even less data about what's going on with Idaho and the state?
Well, I think some of it's tying to the data, and I'll let Director Jepson talk about it. We've got lots of new testing venues. Hospitals are ramping up. Some pharmacies are doing it. All the work that Crush Curve are doing, our testing's going up. In the reporting, particularly if they're going out of state, and now we've got some new facilities inside the state. It takes a little time for them to get there. But Director Jepson, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, and just to add to the governor's comments, we do see testing capacity going up, but we are actually seeing the benefit of this vast majority of Idahoans who have followed the protocols and practices to practice social distancing and those sorts of things. You'll see in our website, as well as the data that's already on the current website today, that we also track the number of people that are showing up to the emergency room with COVID-like symptoms. And what we're seeing there is a very promising trend where we're seeing far fewer of those now than we were 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think part of what we're seeing is increased test capacity, but also the benefit of all the great actions and protocols that citizens of Idaho followed, which really has slowed the number of folks out there, or the number of folks getting infected with the virus. We are seeing the capacity open up. We are going to be focused on expanding testing and getting more testing done. That will probably have our numbers rise because we do know that there are people out there that are positive that have not been tested. But as long as we continue to see the good trend of those that are severely ill and utilization of healthcare capacity where it is today, that's no different than we are today. We'll just have better data as we move forward. So again, our goal is to increase testing. It's one of many tools that we have in our toolkit to make sure we can keep a handle on what's happening. The other is how many of those folks are showing up at the emergency room or the hospital. And then we'll also be ramping up contact tracing, trace where all those folks have been to see if the other folks need to be tested.
Governor, it's Don with Boise Dev here. What specific things is the state doing to help the dramatically rising number of unemployed Idahoans and the businesses who are struggling under the weight of all this?
Well, of course, unemployment is a big part of that. As we all know, that huge program that the federal government put in place, and some of the dollars have not gotten out as fast as they have. But I think the most important thing we're doing is adding certainty. We're saying, given the criteria that we are going to put out, if X happens, the public are going to get to do Y. So, your business is going to get to open up at this point in time. It's a great incentive for people to do the right thing. But I think certainty and confidence are probably the two most important things that Daryl and his committee are focused on, so that people know, what the rules are going to be going forward. What's the opportunity for people to get back to work? What's the opportunity for businesses to sell their products and services? And I think certainty and confidence is the most important thing we can give them. And whatever we can do to facilitate those federal programs going out, we also want to do that.
Governor, do you have enough tests? Does the state of Idaho have enough tests? Do you have to purchase more?
Well, yes, we are, and there's a lot of different. There are a lot of different people that are more hospitals, more clinics, pharmacies, different groups that are doing testing, and that's incredibly important. But you got to realize, as we do these tests, they consume some of our PPE. This is an issue that we've talked about here over and over. Even if somebody swooped down and said, here's all the tests you need, we couldn't do them because we wouldn't have enough qualified healthcare workers to do them, and we wouldn't have enough capacity from a PPE issue. So, but because of what's happening, because of the fact that Washington's a good example, even in the East Coast, some of that's ramping down. The global availability of some of this PPE is getting better. So that's why we have introduced this staged plan. We can't do it all at once. We can't test everybody at once. But one of the criteria is watching those hospitals, watching for those respiratory compromised people. Does that reflect the lack of testing? But we're all in for increasing testing, but we just can't get there because of lab capacity, PPE, and particularly personnel to offer it. And it's not equilateral all around the state. We've got areas where it's still very difficult. Generally, in these rural areas, if a hospital has a suspect, they take the sample and send it to Director Jepson's lab, and we run it here in Boise. And that's not an ideal model, but that's how we've been doing it in rural Idaho. But the more that these other urban areas solve their own problem means that capacity that Director Jepson has in our state lab will be available for those rural areas. So it's like all of this because nobody expected this. We've got to do it incrementally, and that's what we're doing with this plan.
What about
Governor,
mentioned opening the state in 4 stages, and even in that first stage, there's going to be significant increase in parents needing early childhood education or early childhood care. Are you confident with the closures of childhood education centers and preschools and daycares that there is an apparatus available to take care of that increased need as the state reopens?
No, I'm not certain of a lot of things. It's our intent and it's our goal to do that, but daycare, childcare, all those other issues are issues that we're working on. But I will tell you that there was probably a shortage of daycare 90 days ago in the state of Idaho.
Governor, this is Ayana with Page Q in Coeur d'Alene. In regards to the nursing homes, we know that across the nation they're being hit really hard with COVID-19. One especially in Lewiston at the Life Care Center, with more than half of the cases in Nez Perce County coming from that facility. Are you allocating any extra resources to nursing homes? And do you have a plan to keep it contained so it doesn't become like the situation in Kirkland, Washington?
Well, let me let Director Jepson talk about this, but from the very start of our awareness of the COVID virus coming here, Director Jepson's coronavirus working group, assisted living centers, places where we have high densities and populations of people that are very susceptible to this has been top of mind. That was some of the first guidance that we put out. And Director Jepson could talk about we don't have it in very many of them, but the ones we do, it's a big problem. So, Dave.
Thank you, Governor. From the very beginning, as the Governor mentioned, focus on long-term care facilities and assisted living has been a top priority for us. Just watching what's happened around the globe and in our neighbors in Washington. The very first subcommittee we formed on the working group, it all blends together now, but over 30 days ago, was a strike team focused on long-term care and assisted living that brought industry experts, operators of those facilities, clinical experts together to make sure we stayed on top of everything we could possibly do to help protect those residents in those facilities. We have a large number of facilities in the state, almost 100. We have obviously had a couple of cases at several of those facilities, but what I can tell you is that the response, both the infectious control has been stellar from many, in fact, all of those facilities. And if a case has been detected, it's been detected early as we prioritize testing there, and the actions have been taken quickly to isolate and to protect the rest of those residents. At one point in time, we had 16 of our healthcare facilities, long-term care facilities with a positive case. We're now down to 10. So we're actually headed the right direction with those facilities. It's impossible to guarantee zero, but I think we've done a very good job so far as a state of taking care of those most vulnerable people in those settings. And we will continue to do that. In all the stages that the governor has spoken about, a top priority is going to be protecting those that are most vulnerable, particularly those in long-term care and assisted living facilities.
Governor Betsy Russell with the Idaho Press. Under your phased plan, what happens if one of the phases fails? Let's say in phase 1, you open up facilities and people gather in large church services and our number of cases goes up. How do you proceed at that point?
Betsy, I don't know if I got it all. Run that by me again.
Okay, what happens if one of your phases essentially fails? If we slip backwards, if the curve starts going up, what do you do?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. We delay everything else. We got the intent, and you see this at the federal level. You see this CDC talking about this. That given our limitations about what we know about the fact that we don't have a good treatment, therapeutic, we don't have a vaccine, we have to do this in stages. And if we slip backwards, those dates are all going to move out, and that's why. We're trying to give a concrete roadmap. That concrete roadmap has criteria in it that if we have a spike in any of these critical components that we're at, then we delay the next steps in the way. So that's why everybody that wants the state open has got a big incentive to be as cooperative and continue the behavior they've had asked for us to get there. We will stop. Go ahead.
You've had a lot of questions from owners of hair and nail salons and businesses like that about where do they fit in your stages?
They're in stage 2.
How do you preserve social distancing in businesses where people have to, by nature of the business, have contact?
Well, those entities that are further down the road, part of the reason it's there is to give them the certainty about what they need to do. They need to maintain social distancing. They have to have very high sanitary standards about how many people are in their facility, that everybody that's there is healthy, I don't know how you get a haircut with a mask on, but I know that's going to be talked about. But they're in the queue, and we're going to give them as good a guidance as we can. We'll also track about what other states are doing, what kind of guidance we get from CDC.
Sir, when do you expect schools to be able to open up under your phased-in?
Well, the question about schools, the state board and the superintendent have given guidance, but part of the reason we're doing all this is it's my sincere intent that this fall for sure we get back to school. There's some school districts now that they're allowing their kids to come in, pick up their books, get their work plans, perhaps get a laptop or a internet connected device. So they're working on it, but the intent is that everything we do in this plan is successful to where we can go back to school in the fall.
Good morning, Governor. This is Ruth Brown with the Idaho Statesman. I'm going to go back to Betsy's question. You referred to if there are small outbreaks, we as Idahoans will need to step backwards in the phase. People will likely get frustrated. There could be more protests. How do you balance that while helping people understand the importance of the public health aspect and dealing with people who are just flat out being openly defiant? How do you balance that?
Welcome to my world. That's what I worry about every single day. Is giving people a roadmap, but trying to incentivize the best possible behavior, whether it's of the individual, whether it's of the business to get there. And that's why I'm talking to everybody today, is to give them that, because this economy will not rebound if consumers don't have confidence.
Governor, it's Don with Boise Dev again here. I'm struck at kind of a mismatch in the guidelines here. You say that houses of worship can open in the first phase, but the no gatherings should be held with large amounts of people. Aren't those the same thing? And why is there a difference when you're looking at science-based solutions?
I was on a phone call with a group of pastors yesterday, and I said, 5,000 people in Bronco Stadium is not a problem. 20 people in the little chapel in the front yard is too many. You've got to take and you got to take the science, and you got to take good sense and implement it in your particular church building. One of the things I told them about that they need to really start considering is airflow. That they need to make sure that, fortunately, we're in the good part of the year, that they've got the right kind of circulation there. We're going to give them guidance about what they need to do, but the input I'm having is they want to be as thoughtful as they can about their parishioners, that they're safe. So I'm trusting them to do that.
Governor, the money that Congress provided for the Paycheck Protection Program went really quick. They've allocated some more money for that. Is the state are they helping any of Idaho's small businesses to apply for those loans and stuff? It seems like, we heard about the large Shake Shack and those kind of companies getting a lot of the money. And it seems like small businesses are generally a little less sophisticated and, may need some help trying to get some of that money.
Well, they do, John, and our Department of Finance, Director Perkins over there, is in constant communication with banks and credit unions, because that's the venue where a lot of that money goes out, including Small Business Administration. We've got a great relationship with the SBA here in Idaho. It was a huge program put together in a very short period of time. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that there are some significant impediments to having it work perfectly. This new flush of cash that Congress is going to send us, now I think most of the businesses that maybe applied and didn't get the first tranche of funding out of it are going to be much more aware. But I do know the banks and credit unions are much more knowledgeable about it than they were when it passed the first time. So we're trying to be of any kind of assistance there.
If you have any statistics on how many businesses and how much money those businesses in Idaho have received?
No, I don't.
Governor, as the slow rollout begins, those people in the first stages, you mentioned consumer confidence, but aside from just consumer confidence, the people who are going to be working these jobs may have a crisis of confidence as well. They may be concerned about leaving their kids with somebody. They may be concerned about going back to work in the first place. Is there any conversation with business leaders about guidelines so that there's a little bit of protection there, so that people who want to work from home and can work from home have access to that capability, or people who aren't ready to come back are protected through their PTO programs and things that private employers have?
Well, in this document, we talk about part of the way to maintain social distancing and continue the great success we've made is those businesses that offer their employees the opportunity to work remotely. And of course, they've learned a lot. Daryl and I talked about this at the early stages, is they've learned a lot about remote delivery, and that's going to really help us by limiting the exposure and the opportunity for community spread by having people do that. But if there was a way I could wave my wand and say I want everybody to have 100% confidence, I would do it. But these triggers in here are just an honest effort by our administration and our healthcare advisors to do this as well as we can, but with the caveat that if things don't go right, if something happens, that we're going to go back, because one promise I want to give the people of the state of Idaho is protecting their health and the long-term economic prosperity is critical to me. There is a big overlap between healthcare and consumer confidence and economic prosperity, and anybody that talks about them as two different silos isn't paying attention to sociological behavior.
Governor Little, Melissa Dablin from Idaho Public Television. What is the state doing to prepare for a possible second surge this fall and winter that some of the public health experts are talking about?
Well, my healthcare crew, when this first started, we got a lot of experience with the seasonal flu. But generally, the seasonal flu is, we don't even keep records this time of year when the weather changes. So there's an enormous amount of research, thought, writing, some of it accurate, some of it not so much, about what's going to be the complications when the weather changes. One thing we do know is the seasonal flu comes back every year, and if we don't have capacity in our healthcare, and we even have, if the COVID is going along like this, we need capacity in our respiratory part of our healthcare for the seasonal flu. And so at a minimum, there's that nexus between COVID and the seasonal flu. But there's ample evidence, and I've got experts who know way more about it than I do, that there could be more complications. That's why therapeutics, further development of a vaccine, but more importantly, contact tracing and testing is imperative before we get to the fall.
Governor Little, this is Joey Parker with KTVB. Can you go over the criteria that will need to be met to enter in stage 1, and then going over the 4 phases? Does this mean if everything goes to plan by June 26th, is that when Idaho can start to expect to return to normal, or somewhat normal, or new normal? Or is it going to take much longer?
Somewhat normal is a good description. We are not going to be back to normal until we have a vaccine. I just got to be straight with the people of Idaho. The novel coronavirus is, in fact, it's novel. We're learning more about it every day. But the best practices that I talked about, that the people of Idaho have been incredible in implementing, are going to stay around for a long time. We're going to ladder up, if everything goes according to plan, we're going to ladder up to the end of June, getting the state open. With that caveat is if we have a problem, we absolutely have to preserve our healthcare capacity, because then we will lose consumer confidence, and more importantly, we'll put the people of Idaho at risk. But we were not going to return to normal until we get a vaccine or herd immunity, and herd immunity is a long way out.
Then, Governor, can you go over that criteria that needs to be met before May 1st to start stage 1?
It's in the plan. It's actually pretty technical, and I've got people here that can address it. But the reason it's technical is because it's technical. It's not just some arbitrary beds. It's not some arbitrary. It's a combination of the best science that we put together here in Idaho, along with the guidance that we've been given by CDC. But it's in the criteria for the staged approach.
Governor Keith with the Associated Press. Question about the stages. Is it possible for different parts of the state to be in a different stage?
Thanks, Keith. I get that question all the time, and my first reaction is I don't know why not. But as we saw in Boise, when Boise closed down and Garden City didn't, everybody raced to Garden City, and that created a problem for the community as a whole here. We're seeing it now in northern Idaho, where even at the very start of the issue, all the waterways in the state of Washington were closed down, and we didn't have them all closed in Idaho. And we saw this big run of people from the state of Washington that went into Kootenai County and other counties up there as a result of that. The parts of Idaho that have the least amount of community spread and no lab confirmed cases, I would add, that doesn't mean they don't have cases, but lab confirmed cases are areas with minimal healthcare capacity. So if one of those counties that doesn't have a hospital, some of them don't even have a doctor, were to open up what they and start with significant community spread, then that means that the adjacent area would have community spread and would have a problem. I've looked at it over and over. I've talked to most of the other governors. We all talk about it. We don't know how you could implement it, given the natural state of people to try and go to the least regulated area.
Governor, you talk about the need for legitimate science and the people you're talking to get those technical answers, because it's not an easy thing to answer these questions. But a lot of the concerns and the protests are based in a lack of scientific understanding. So do you see yourself in the near future, or looking into the next legislative session, being a more vocal supporter of beefing up scientific standards and educating Idaho students on the scientific method and the importance of understanding these small scientific principles?
Well, I think that's been my position in the past. You know, as I just stated a little bit ago, the nexus between economic prosperity and good health is undeniable. And anything that significantly disrupts public health puts our economy in Idaho at jeopardy. My number one goal from the get-go when I got this job was economic prosperity to all. Right now, the biggest impediment to economic prosperity is this health crisis and the lack of confidence. So I will continue on that pathway going forward.
Governor, I'm trying to be clear on how this phased approach fuses with the reopening of schools. I mean, the state board guidelines say that schools can reopen, but they can't as long as a stay-at-home order is in place. So for state board purposes, when does the stay-at-home order lift to the point where schools can consider the idea of reopening?
Well, Kevin, you probably spent more time at the state board meeting than I have, but I believe the direction from the state board was they could open up if it was if their health district thought it was a good practice. Remember, the schools closed down before we did our stay-home order. That was a decision by basically the trustees and the superintendents in those schools. By fall, I don't see anything in our criteria that would prevent the schools from opening. And in fact, that's our desire and wish. But that still means that there are going to be different protocols in those schools than we've had for a long, long time.
Governor, you talked before about the frustration felt by a lot of Idahoans with your stay-home order. Another group of people that are frustrated are people that have been laid off of their jobs, have filed for unemployment, but still haven't seen any money come through. What steps are being taken in that way for a system that's obviously overwhelmed by all of these claims? And what do you say to those folks that are still waiting?
Well, first off, my heart goes out to them, particularly if they're in a position to where they basically are, can't pay their rent, can't buy groceries. But we talk about this, and Darrell's committee's going to talk about it. When I talk with other governors, this was a brand new program. The software didn't exist, the training didn't exist, the details of it didn't exist, and that's part of the problem. Right prior to this occurring in March, we were about to report record employment. Everywhere I went, I was on a call yesterday in the Bonneville County area. When I was down there, people were just beating the heck out of me. They couldn't get enough help. So my Department of Labor was focused like a laser on how do we get a workforce for these people that need help. You can imagine if that's your number one goal, in a matter of a week or 2 weeks going to, we've got these massive numbers coming in and we've got to process unemployment with some new unemployment rules. What we've done this week, the Board of Examiners, we approved a significant increase in overtime pay for the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor is buying, is hiring new help to try and get us caught up. We are getting caught up, and we still got a ways to go, but we're doing all we can with the Department of Labor to as efficiently as possible get those claims answered.
Governor, you talk about parts of the state are doing significantly better than other parts. But on the flip side of that, there's one specific part of the state that's doing significantly worse. Looking at Blaine County and those communities there, how does their timeline look different as the rollout begins?
Well, of course, Blaine County, Director Jepson and I were together the day that we confirmed community spread. We knew there was some activity up there, and we thought we knew perhaps who it was and who they had contact with. But as soon as we started having cases that we didn't, that's the definition of community spread. That community, we had conversations with the mayors, with the county commissioner, with the healthcare people up there. They put a lot of things in place. They just opened up the construction industry and I think the landscape industry specific to Blaine County. I don't know if Blaine County or just catch it in Haley. But they did that. But what's important is what they've done with their healthcare, their facilities. They've got tents out in front of the hospital. The staff is trained. They've got an adequate supply of PPE. They've got testing there. So they and they were going to do, and we talked yesterday, and I don't know if they were going to do a random test, antibody test, to see if they could determine how wide the spread was there. And I don't know where that process is. It's probably a good idea, because we could probably learn something about populations in Idaho, given that was literally the #1 area from a density standpoint in the United States of COVID spread, kind of because of the way it snuck up on them.
Governor, you've spoken multiple times. Sorry, Governor, you've spoken multiple times about the need for face masks as part of the stopping of this spread. But are you going to require state employees who interface with the public, like the Idaho State Police, to wear face masks? And are you going to talk to city officials and sheriff's departments about officers wearing face masks when they interact with the public?
We'll visit with them. We'll do the right thing.
Governor Keith at the AP with a question specifically about what happens on May 1. It sounds like the stay-at-home order expires on April 30th, but it looks like the stage 1 guidelines, that order, it's not an order anymore, but those guidelines are still in place. Is that how it works? The order expires, but the guidelines remain?
Well, we'll do the legal document, but we felt it was really important. I wasn't that comfortable with last week with the lack of certainty. The reason we're doing this today, and I'm glad that you're all joining us, is so that people have some certainty about a roadmap going forward. We'll put pen to paper and get the legal part of it done, but we wanted to, as soon as we had our team had established a plan that matched up with federal guidance, we wanted to get that out to the public to give them some certainty about what was going to take place going forward. So the documents will be drafted, and you can go to the website and see a lot of it. But the specific guidance that will take place after the 30th of this month will be forthcoming later. But this is a general guideline. But remember, over and over, this is only a guideline if we continue to meet the criteria that we have, the gating criteria, which the president talked about last Friday.
So does that mean that the stay-at-home order will remain in effect in May?
Well, it'll be, we will be encouraging the stay-at-home order. We'll look at the specificity of it as we go on. This, as I said in my comments, the best way for us to be successful with this is to people to continue to maintain that social distancing so that we don't have any spread, because the less spread we have, the better it's going to be for all of Idaho.
Governor, is there any understanding or any updated numbers on projected loss to revenue over the last month or two?
I think this afternoon I've got a meeting as we do that with our economic team. We've got pessimistic, optimistic, 2 or 3 models in between, and then but I can tell you from talking to other governors, I looked at that document yesterday, our first cut at it, and a very, very preliminary, that our worst case scenario is better than a lot of states' best case scenario.
Hi, Governor. This is Grell Coughlin with Mountain Express. I'm wondering about people who might be getting their jobs back in the coming weeks, but who might not feel safe or comfortable returning to work. Maybe they're in a high-risk population or they live with someone who's high risk. Will there be any state resources or assistance available for those people?
Well, that's a good question, and we're going to have some. There are going to be some resources that are available through CARES 1. We still haven't seen the specificity on CARES 2, 3, and 4, but we do need to be very sensitive to people that are caretakers for people that are in this classification, that no matter what happens, until we get a really good therapeutic, until we get a vaccine, are going to be a risk. And we will look at that. But you bring up a good point, because they may not want to have broader exposure if they're taking care of somebody. Director Jepson talked about the people in assisted living centers, but there is that big class of people that are taking care of people, and we'll look at what is the right thing to do for them.
And would those people be eligible for unemployment if they felt unsafe going back to work because they have somebody at home that potentially they could expose?
John, I don't know, but we'll find out.
Can I also go back to the enforcement issue that on Tuesday, Meridian Police went to one of their parks where people were playing on the playground. They asked them to leave numerous times, and eventually a woman was arrested. And then later that evening, a group of people showed up outside the officer's house to protest. What was your reaction to hearing that?
Disgusting. Next question.
Governor, you keep talking about the vaccination and how we're waiting for that vaccine so that things can get back to normal. But Idaho does have pretty lax rules when it comes to enforcing those vaccinations, especially when it comes to schools. Is that something you see changing when this vaccination is ready and when we need the majority of people to be taking these vaccinations?
We need to have of course, that's in code, and we need to have a robust dialogue with the lawmakers on what we do there. We don't know what we assume it's going to be a vaccine. I doubt that it's going to be a pill, but there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. Fortunately, we have some time. I did ask the administration, one of the critical questions that I got from my team here is about, do we have enough syringes? And I know there's a lot of discussion at the national and global level about how do you prioritize those vaccines going out. I doubt very much that there's going to be 320 million doses of vaccine available at the first date of approval. So, as is always the case, it'll be like we're doing testing now. It'll be healthcare providers, it'll be most compromised, it'll be public safety issues. So that will be part of the discussion we have going forward when there's a vaccine.
But will you advocate for stricter guidelines for making sure that people are getting this vaccination, and that there is an expectation, especially for parents sending their kids to school, that this vaccination is something that they're taking?
There's an expectation that people will do the right thing, and if we have to look at the code, we should. One more question.
Governor, I wanted to circle back around to my question about masks and state employees who interface with the public. You said we'll talk to them and do the right thing, but what does that look like? Are you going to be making masks available? Are you doing anything to procure masks for people like the Idaho State Police or people at the Department of Health and Welfare? And are you going to require them to wear those masks?
Our team, we will look at it. Dave, I'll let Dave be the last, do the last question. But we've advised, as I did in my comments, we've advised everybody to wear a mask. But as everybody on the call knows, there's two different kinds of masks. There's the one that protects the public, which many people wear, the cotton mask, which we're advocating for. But then there's ones that we have in the healthcare facility, the N95 mask, and they're available to the police now. The standard that they have when they wear them, I'm not familiar with. But Dave, do you want to talk about the mask question?
Thank you, Melissa, for the question. So at the state level, there are some of our functions that we will be looking at have been requiring masks. That would be such as the Veterans Administration Hospital, which is a long-term care facility, State Hospital North and South, those places where we have confined populations, corrections, those sorts of things where that's been required. The broader question I think you're asking is really around those that are interacting with the public, but not necessarily one of those special confined settings where an outbreak would be catastrophic. And there, the state is working through its guidance on that. We would probably not be using, just because of supply, medical grade, except for police and first responders. And I was actually just on a conversation with the head of HR for the state just yesterday, actually, working our way through this issue on masks. So we're still kind of sorting that out, just like everybody else is. And other employers are, and we expect to have some guidance very soon.
All right. Thank you very much. Stay safe, everybody.
Okay, so there you have it. The big announcement right now is from Governor Brad Little announcing that the stay-at-home order will be basically phased out in 4 stages over the next 2 months, each stage being about 2 weeks, Maggie.
But the big question is, Doug, will we meet the 14-day criteria that we have to meet to start stage 1, which begins on May 1st? We didn't really get that question answered, so we will.
Well, I guess which could begin on May 1st then, right? Yeah.
So May 1st, let's talk about what will happen on May 1st if we in fact meet that criteria. We're going to get right to stage 1 and give you an idea of what will be able to happen. It looks like
that should say places of worship can open.
Places of worship, Governor Little says, can reopen if they practice strict social distancing guidelines, sanitation protocol, and any CDC guidance that may be tough in churches to separate everyone by 6 feet to make sure that the virus isn't spread. But if all goes as planned by May 1st, stage 1 looks like places of worship and retail are the only things that will be up and running, Doug.
Yeah, and Maggie, I had a question on Twitter from somebody saying, is this, like big box stores like Kohl's, but why not open small businesses first? And I think the answer to that is when he says most retail, he means stores, jewelry stores, flower shops, clothing stores of all sizes, small, locally owned, or the big box stores, but not yet bars, nightclubs, and restaurant dining rooms in stage 1.
Bars, restaurants, that includes hair salons, nail salons, they will remain closed. Large venues and daycares can reopen. Also organized youth activities and camps, those can reopen in stage 1. But this is going to be a long process, Doug.
Well, let's look at stage 2 then, too. That's be the next phase if criteria is met. And this is if everything stays on track. Stage 2 could be reached by May 16th and would last for 2 weeks. In this case, dine-in restaurants can open if their plans are approved for how they are going to practice what they're calling business protocols, which will be more strictly defined coming up as these phases move forward by the governor's new Economic Rebound Advisory Committee. And that will also, of course, include social distancing, cleanliness and sanitation issues. Indoor gyms can open, hair salons can open as well, as long as they meet the criteria that's going to be developed.
We don't know what that criteria is going to be.
Because it's going to be developed as we go.
Exactly. Right. The committee will be developing that. So let's move on to stage 3 for our viewers, explain to them what will happen then. It looks like during stage 3, we're in a type of holding pattern. That's between May 30th and June 12th. Visits to senior living facilities and other facilities like in the jails, corrections, those are still prohibited. Bars and nightclubs will remain closed through June 12th at least. Plans for operating, though, and diminished standing room occupancy in order to open in stage 4 can begin, so they can start to think about reopening. Large venues, movie theaters, sporting venues will remain closed until at least June 12th through stage 3. Once again, they have to practice limited physical distancing in order to open in stage 4. So there are a lot of questions here. We know you have them. We're going to try and answer them as we go. We just got this PDF right now.
And let's go to stage 4 right now to see what that entails. This is basically visits to senior facilities can begin, but those who interact with residents and patients must be diligent about hygiene and physical distancing. Bars and nightclubs can open, as Maggie mentioned, with diminished standing room occupancy where applicable and appropriate. Large venues such as movie theaters, sporting venues can operate under limited physical distancing protocols. And that is, again, June 13th to the 26th, if the criteria is met from the previous stage.
Yes.
And he was asked about, could this backslide? And he had said at his news conference last week that this could be a case of, easing restrictions and tightening restrictions. So we have to see how this plays out. And Maggie, you and I were talking while the governor was on about what the criteria is that we know of so far. And it's under, the governor said, well, it's technical because it's technical. And it is, but basically it comes in 3 categories: syndromic, epidemiologic, and healthcare. What it boils down to really is that the number of cases of patients who are ill is going down, the number of cases confirmed is going down, and also that the healthcare facilities have the capacity to treat all the patients who need to be treated.
And the personnel that we need. And he also mentioned rebound.idaho.gov. That is the new website that we'll all be referring to take a look at these stages. Rebound.idaho.gov. Remember that. You can check in on that. But the governor did say that even after June 26th, things will not be quote unquote normal. He says things will not be normal in Idaho until we have a vaccine.
Yeah, I really think that was one of the big takeaways here, Maggie. He said it would be somewhat normal, perhaps, after June 26th, but yes, not back to normal until a vaccine, and we're hearing that's still 12 to 18 months away.
Yeah.
And he urged Idahoans and thanked Idahoans for continuing to do their best to be safe, to stay socially distant and physically distant, and to wash their hands and wear masks and all that. He says that it's working, and we'll keep following this to see how this Economic Rebound Advisory Committee develops these criteria.
And Doug, we should also mention we don't know what's going to happen on May 1st. We still have to wait till April 30th. That's still a few days away. Wait for him to comment on what the next phase is. Are we going to move into stage 1 or not? So keep it tuned right here to Channel 7. Of course, we'll have the very latest as we go through these coming days.
Yeah, all right. Well, hey, Maggie, thanks for hanging out a little bit
You're
late
welcome.
today.
Yeah.
We're going to get started with the news at noon right now. And everybody, we're going to take a break real fast and then get set back up and join you back here for the rest of the news at noon.